So a few years ago, Lady Gaga came out on a stage with a bedazzled cane, and you wanted to know what the reaction from the disability community is. I mean, you can go in many different directions with this. I think it's sort of a question of appropriation, or it could be any number of things. But I think of Prince and his purple cane, and I think of the way that sort of canes throughout history have. It's interesting. Actually, there's somebody who's been researching the stigmatization of the cane. It's one of the few products in the world that has gotten uglier over time, and it started after World War II. But I guess the thing that I'm more focused on is I don't necessarily mind if somebody uses a cane as an accessory. That was actually what it was initially intended for. But the question for me is that my cane serves two needs. It's both physical and it's also performative. My cane allows me to get a seat on the subway. It tells people to be a little bit more patient. It makes sure I don't get honked at in the crosswalk. And so I guess my question would be, if enough people started using canes, would I get my needs met? So, I mean, that's the best answer I have. He works in digital user design, and he's wondering sort of a lot of people are quick to dismiss accessibility as not being necessary because much of it you can't see. I guess is that I didn't do a good job of explaining the question. There's currently a lawsuit right now happening with Glossy. Is it Glossier? Glossier? Glossier, yeah. And it's a blind person that wanted to shop their products and just simply couldn't. So they sued. And that's been over the past few days. A couple of days before that, I was speaking to an accessibility lawyer. She's probably one of the top lawyers in this space. She's been around for 20 years. And she's really sort of turned off by the fact that this sort of legal, the legalities of compliance are becoming a field, right? Like it's become that big. And so, I think when you get to the point where it's become an issue, you realize that at no point have you spoken to a single disabled person throughout the process. I don't have issues with digital accessibility, but if I was brought in from day one, I would know to look for that because my friends do. And so I think this is sort of one of the things that you can really sort of save yourself from when you design with rather than for, is these things that come up that you may have forgotten about. But it is interesting. Like I look to a history of what I see is so we could look specifically to National Adapt. So they started in the 1960s, and one of the things they fought for was bus lifts. And at the time, they were perceived as radical. They were chaining themselves to buses to ensure that they were getting their needs met, and it was really hard at the time for people to watch this happen. And so it's interesting because they're perceived as radical until they get to the ADA, when suddenly it seems completely obvious that, yes, we should create bus lifts. And so bus lifts are written into the ADA, and it just becomes this natural thing that radicals had done. But what also happens in the process is all the people that worked that whole time to achieve their inclusion, they actually wrote themselves out of the process because it becomes compliance-based, and they're no longer needed in their own inclusion. And so for me, it's sort of like, who can we turn to that has expertise in this field and really allow them to lead the conversation?
That was awesome, and
Thank
I love
you.
the baseball stuff. That's great. So we all belong to these societal groups, and
Yeah.
And basically I just want to know how you as an advocate deal with the spectrum of people in that group. I had a conversation with my sister, and I have a very different feeling about my brown skin than she does. And how do you navigate that?
Yeah, well, so because I am social model and I believe that we're disabled by the world around us rather than our bodies, I think that makes it less of a spectrum issue, right? I'm not talking about a diagnosis. I don't specifically talk about my medical diagnosis. And so I think there's a few ways you can look at it. I think because, especially sort of in these intersectional conversations, because disability has been left out of so much, I think that there is a tinge of rejection within the disability community of these greater diversity conversations. So Liz DuPoint and Stephen Gilson are the two disability design theorists I told you about. And they looked up the word diversity in the 1913 Webster's Dictionary. And what they found is it was a one-word definition. and that was variety. But you look at diversity now, and what it means is of, not the majority. And so what that actually has come to mean is like it's almost like you have like a white male, a cis white male here, and you have the most intersectional person on the end. And what's really happening in the process from a disabled perspective that I see is that we're not actually rewriting what power means, we're just rewriting who gets the power. And so I think that the disability community really has an opportunity in here to actually rewrite the structure of what power means, because we've been sort of excluded from both conversations. So I don't know if that helps.